Welcome to the Bella Vista Gardening Program. I'm Geri Hoerner, and with me today is Carrin Troutman, and she is the Chief Horticulturist and Director of Foundation Gardens at Compton Gardens and Peel House Gardens. And today we'll be telling you all about these gardens and hope to encourage you to visit them. And we'll also be discussing the upcoming events, gardening events in July, and things to do in your garden in July, things you need to tend to this month. And there aren't a lot of gardening activities in July. This is the hot month where you just water and weed and deadhead, but you want to mark your calendar because the Benton County Fair will be August 17th through the 21st, and we'll have more information about that on our next month's program. But the Benton County Fair has a Master Gardener booth, and I'm not sure what the title is going to be this year. Last year they did herbs, and the year before they did butterfly gardens, so I'm not sure what the theme is this year. But mark your calendars for the Benton County Fair. It's always fun to see all the exhibits. They have a rose show there too, so we'll have more information about that next month. And if you've watched the program in the past, you know we usually have a Meet the Masters segment that where we meet a master gardener and we visit the gardens. But this month we want to encourage you to go out and visit gardens yourself, and that's why we have Carrin here. And Carrin's going to tell us about the Peel House Gardens and the Compton Gardens and these beautiful gardens that we have in our area we're so lucky to have. So, and you're the director of all this planting and activity, and you're just a busy little bee, I know.
I am. I've been with the foundation for 8 years now, and I've worked my way up from being an hourly employee to now being the director of horticulture and foundation gardens.
And the Peel House Garden was the first garden.
The Peel House Garden was the first garden. We're actually 20 years that we've been established, and so we're celebrating that. The Peel House Garden is about 3.5 acres of formal Victorian gardens. We have a perennial garden, we have a shade garden with native plants, we also have a cutting garden and a children's garden, and we have 2 herb gardens and a vegetable garden. It's hard to believe that we have that much garden on only 3.5 acres.
You've got that really packed in there well.
We do.
And it's so easy to get to, because if you go to Walmart in Bentonville, all you have to do is go to the end of the parking lot and you're at the Peel House, and you can go to the gardens. So there's no reason you can't get to the Peel House Garden anytime, because it's so convenient to get there.
And the garden is free. The mansion, there is a small fee to go through the mansion if you want to, but if you just want to visit the garden itself, then it is absolutely free for you to come and walk through the garden. We like to think of ourselves as a green oasis in all of that concrete that is surrounding us.
Right. It is a little oasis there. It's just wonderful. So, and I noticed that every time I go by there, there's different things blooming. So it's not like a one-time trip. You have to just keep going back. You know, every month there's something else blooming and there's something else going on. And I know the Master Gardeners are very helpful with both the gardens and keeping them maintained and doing work at the greenhouses. So
absolutely, we love our volunteers very much at both of our gardens, and it very much is a seasonal garden. Even in wintertime, there is still plenty to come and see and bloom. And you mentioned the heat of the summer. Right now our gardens are in full swing at both facilities. Lots of color at both gardens to come and see.
As you do have a lot of annuals that you plant. I know the Master Gardeners help plant those and work there. And then you give them cookies and, and treats when they come and work.
I do. I bribe with cookies for volunteers to come and give me their time.
It's amazing what the volunteers can do. It really is.
It really
is.
It's
wonderful. And then Compton Gardens is newer.
Compton Gardens is newer. Compton Gardens opened in 2005. And we are about 7 acres there, and we focus on native plants of the Ozark Plateaus there. We have 2 state champion trees. We have over 55 different species of trees on site. And
Now, a state champion tree, some people might not know what that is. Can you explain that?
Absolutely. A state champion tree means that it is the largest tree of that particular species in the entire state of Arkansas. The Arkansas Forest Commission keeps track of that. They come out and they take 3 measurements. They take the height of the tree, they take the canopy width of the tree, and then they also take the circumference of the trunk, and they determine if it's the largest tree in the state of Arkansas.
Well, that's amazing. You have 2 of them there?
We have 2 of them there. We have the hybrid Chinese-American chestnut tree on site, and we also have the yellowwood, both of which are state champion trees.
That's great. That yellowwood is a beautiful tree. It's just beautiful. It's one of my favorites. And you can grow those in your garden also. They're native to the area.
Yellowwoods are native to the area. All the plants that we have in the garden are native to the area, and they're used to growing here. They like the conditions. They like the heat. They like being here, and that's our focus, is to educate on how to incorporate native plants into your own garden. And with Compton, seeing how we're a free public garden, you can come look at our specimens of native plants and determine for yourself if you would like to incorporate them in your garden.
Right. It's such a good learning experience to go to the gardens and see all the varieties. And you do have most of them named too. I mean, you have labels so they know what they're looking at. Most of the plants have identification, so you can take that down and go to the nurseries. And it's hard to find the native plants, I think, in various nurseries. So where do you get all your plants if you don't find them on the property?
Oh, that's a great question, and that's a question that we get a lot. We have several really good resources that nurseries are becoming more familiar with native plants. The more that you go into nurseries and request native plants, the more that they will supply them to you. There's a wonderful nursery called Pine Ridge Nurseries that's down in Linden, Arkansas that we use. We also use Missouri Wildflower up in Missouri to order in. We now have gotten to the point, since we've been open since 2005, that we are producing a lot of these native plants in-house. And we have a yearly plant sale where we can sell those native plants to the public.
Yes, your plant sale was, I think, the same day as the Bella Vista Garden Plant Sale and the Bentonville Garden Club Plant Sale, and we had all those sales in one day, but they were all different because you had more native plants. We had more, and the Garden Club had more plants out of our gardens, perennials, out of the Bella Vista Gardens, and then Bentonville had they had their plants out of their gardens, but they were a little different than ours too. So the plant sales are a wonderful way to get plants that grow in this area at a really reasonable price. And I know that nursery down in London, it's a little drive down there. It's down there by Highway 40, by the nuclear plant. That's what I look for, is the nuclear plant down there on Highway 40. And it's a little trek to go down there, but they do have some wonderful native plants. And once you get the native plants established, I mean, you have to water them to get them started, but once they're established, you really don't have to do a lot of watering. So do you have a water system at Compton at all?
At Compton, we do have a water system. Our parking lot and around the house are under irrigation. Also, we have some new grass areas down our bike trail that is also irrigated. But other than that, we try not to irrigate it unless it is a new planting, and then we have hoses that we drag out and irrigate the new plants.
Just like we do. You have to drag those hoses out. And I know the trail going through Compton Gardens will lead you down to the Crystal Bridges platform. And now that will always remain open even after Crystal Bridges opens up in November?
Yes, the trail will remain open. The trail is actually part of the Bentonville bike trail that goes through all of Bentonville and eventually will connect up to the Bella Vista bike trail as well. That's kind of our little piece to it. Currently, you can walk to the observation deck for Crystal Bridges from our facility, and if you haven't done that recently, I highly encourage you doing that because the museum just looks gorgeous, and its surrounding, and it's just fascinating to see how long or how close they are to actually opening that museum.
Right. I know we had our field trip last year at Compton Gardens for the Bella Vista Garden Club, and we walked the trail, and we had people from Crystal Bridges do a presentation about the trail and the museum, and it was amazing to see the worker bees down there working on that building and how beautiful it's going to be. So, and every time we go back, it's amazing how much more beautiful it is, and that setting is just gorgeous with the lakes and the way they've maintained the area without disturbing as much as, they tried not to disturb as much as they could. So
we're very anxious, and we're very proud that we are the pedestrian entryway for Crystal Bridges from the square, and eventually our trail will link up to their sculpture trail and their art trail, and you'll be able to walk through Compton Gardens and go right through the front door of the museum, and we're very proud of that. We like to refer to ourselves as Crystal Bridges' big little sister.
That's a good name for it. That's great. Well, I know the Crystal Bridges has the trail guides. They're training right now, and they have to be master gardeners. They put some of the people through the master gardener training in January, and they are going to have trail guides to instruct you as to what's growing where and how things were preserved. And I know the training has just been tremendous for these trail guides. And for the museum guides also, but the trail guides, their training has just been so extensive. And these trail trips, going through these trails are really going to be an adventure once it's opened. And I'm not sure if they're having trail guides working in the fall first before they open, or have you heard anything about when they're starting that?
I really don't know. I think they're not going to start that until the museum is actually
So it opens November 11th is when the museum opens, so you have to keep that on your calendar, because that's going to be quite an event here in Northwest Arkansas. And but up until then, I mean, just walking that trail and seeing the construction, the final phases is really going to be quite an event. And I noticed on the trail there's a lot of families walking with, the walkers, and then there's bicyclers, there's skateboarders sometimes. I don't know if they're supposed to be on it, but there's a lot of people using that wonderful trail through your facility. And your native plants that are so unusual, you have a few that are so hard to find. Are there some of your favorites you want to talk about a little bit?
Oh my gosh. Asking a horticulturist what their favorite plant is kind of like asking a parent who their favorite child is.
That's true.
Each plant has a special place in my heart. One plant in particular that I always talk about is the native Paw Paw trees. That has to be one of my favorite plants because we called my grandfather Paw Paw growing up, and my grandfather is who got me started in horticulture to begin with, and so he's to blame, but he also gets the credit for my career. But not only does it have sentimental value to me, but it's very important in the ecosystem itself. It's the only host plant for the zebra swallow caterpillar, which turns into the zebra swallowtail butterfly. Also, it produces an edible fruit that ripens in the fall. I like to think that it tastes kind of like somebody took an apple and a banana and made a custard out of it. It's really delicious, but there's also all kinds of the forest animals that depend on that for food too.
So you don't get to harvest that very often, I don't think. I think the animals get to it before the people do.
Sometimes they do. Every once in a while I do get to harvest, and then I'll collect the seed and I'll produce new Paw Paw trees that I have for sale during our plant sale too, so that way I can share one of my favorite plants with everybody.
Well, I don't have a Paw Paw tree, and I'm not sure if I have a good location for one. I know that they take almost a special location where they'll grow well. Is it shade, or is it?
Actually, if you start your Paw Paw in full sun, it'll do wonderfully in full sun. Typically they are an understory tree, so they do like a little bit of afternoon shade because our sun is pretty harsh.
Well, I know I'm going to try to grow a Paw Paw tree one of these days. I think maybe next year I'll start on that, make that a project, grow a Paw Paw tree, because they're just so unusual. Are they the ones that have the different leaves on them?
They do. They have kind of an oval shaped leaf to them, very large, as a tropical feel to the tree overall.
So it's a beautiful tree too. But I know the other one, the yellowwood tree, when we saw it in bloom last May, it was just outstanding how beautiful that tree was. And then you had some smaller ones around that were even, you know, more beautiful than the big one because you could see the blooms easier.
Yes.
So when it gets that big, you can't see those blooms as well. But it's a beautiful tree. Now the peel house, you can go through the peel house itself, and that was in Bentonville for how many years? I mean, when was that built?
Well, the peel house was actually built after the Civil War, and it was built by Colonel Samuel Peel, who was the first native-born Arkansan to serve as senator. He was mayor of Bentonville at one point. He was an attorney in Bentonville. While he was senator, he was actually the chairman for the Council of Indian Affairs, so he represented Washington, D.C. to the Native American tribes that lived over in Oklahoma. But he built that house for his wife and his family, and so it has historical meaning to Bentonville and to Arkansas. Now, the house, as I said, was refurbished and redone 20 years ago, and we now have it set up as a museum that you can go through the house and see how it would have been decorated during Colonel Samuel Peel's life.
Yeah, it's really an interesting tour to see. It really is. A lot of history there in that little house, and it's amazing how Walmart just is kind of around it, so you know it's special that Walmart didn't take it out when they put their store in. But the museum, there's a museum also attached to that where there's a little shop in there too, right?
There is. We have what we call our museum store. It's in the Lynch cabin, and that's also where you go to purchase a ticket to go through the house. And I do have to tell you that it is very reasonable, $5 for an adult, $2 for children 6 to 12, and any children under 6 get in free to the mansion. And you can take a guided tour. Our docents are wonderful, wonderful people and give just absolute wonderful tours and history of the house and the grounds.
And the museum has some wonderful, the museum shop has some wonderful things to purchase that you are not going to find anywhere else. They're just something like antiques and just really unique items that you'll find at the museum. And then the Compton house itself, that Dr. Compton lived in. Now you also rent that out periodically for small groups?
We do. The Compton Conference Center is what we call it now, was where Dr. Compton raised his family, but we have redone it that now we can rent it out for private events, for business meetings, also for club meetings, what we call lifetime events. We've had several weddings there, we've had birthday parties there in the past. And then we also have the interpretive center there that's free to go through, that you can actually see pictures that Dr. Compton had taken. You can now see Dr. Compton's canoe, the one that he used to float down the buffalo several times.
And he was so instrumental in saving the buffalo.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother story. We could probably do a whole program on that, but he was just adamant about saving the buffalo, and I think it's one of the only rivers that is protected.
It is. It's actually a national river. In 1972, President Nixon signed the bill protecting the buffalo, making it a national river, and it's one of the only free-flowing rivers in the lower 48 states today.
That's amazing. It's just, and to think that he started it and he was so adamant about saving it, it's a tribute to him. And I know he brought in quite a few plants into his garden to start, so that's why the gardens were so important when he passed away, to keep them going and keep some of the plants that he put in there, and the trees. He has so many trees that he put in. And I think at first, when they first opened Compton, there was really problems with all of the Euonymus and all of the aggressive plants that had just taken over all the properties. And I know you've gone in and really cleaned out so many of those aggressive plants that were just taking over the whole area. And now every time I go, I see new plants and I see new trails and I see new things. It's amazing. So, like I said, we have to encourage people to go and see these gardens and to appreciate all these wonderful planting. And you do get some wonderful ideas about combination plantings. And then you had some wire, like bins that you had put in the woods there that were just amazing, that you put leaves in and then compost.
We like to joke that it is Compton's version of art, since we have Crystal Bridges coming and we have the 3 bears that are located in our garden. So we decided that we needed some garden art to go with. So yes, we do have these wire circle cylinders out towards our meadow area that we put leaves in, and it composts down, and we have it in the shape of a fort so children can run in there and kind of dig through the compost and find worms and other things growing in the compost.
That's so much fun. I think I'm going to try that in my woods, because I've got so many, well, in Bella Vista you get so many leaves and you just don't know what to do with them. So I think those little art farms with the wire and just letting them compost would be a great idea for Bella Vista. So those were really fun to see. And there are things the kids can do, and learn. So be sure and take your family. It's a family-oriented garden, and it's easy to walk. It's not that difficult for anyone. And we're just so happy to have that in our area. I mean, we're just so blessed to have such wonderful gardens and have such dedicated people to keep those gardens going and improving all the time. So we really appreciate you. And we appreciate the master gardeners that work so hard on the gardens. The other garden in the area that is in Fayetteville is the Botanical Garden of the Ozarks, and that's another garden that's just beautiful to see. And they've come a long way too. They've put in like a circle with different gardens around this circle. They have a children's garden, they have a butterfly, the huge butterfly metal sculpture, and then little flowers that the butterfly host plants for butterflies around it. And it's really an interesting garden to see and take the children. So these 3 gardens are just wonderful to visit. So we have to encourage that. And then the things you can do in your garden in July is mainly water and weed and deadhead, and it's not much going on other than water and weed. And I think June was one of the driest Junes we've ever had. We've had the wettest spring, and now June has been the driest June we've had in years. So we are really at a deficit in June, but overall our rain for the year is above average, but June was terrible. So just watch that water level and keep watering those plants, and hopefully we'll get some more rain in July. Maybe July will be the wettest July we've ever had or something. But as far as the annuals, you just have to deadhead and trim them back, and you don't want to put fertilizer on them unless they're a little moist, and water them a little bit and then fertilize them. You don't want to burn those roots because it's so hot. And you might want to try to make oils and vinegars out of your herbs right now. That's a good time to start making your flavored oils and vinegars with your herbs. And then I also use my basil to make pesto. This is a good time to start making that pesto and get it in the freezer. And then after I make it in the blender, I put it in ice cube trays, and then so it's like 1 tablespoon. And then after they're frozen in the trays, I just pop them into a plastic bag. So then in the winter I can just pull out a tablespoon or 2 of pesto, so it works out really well. And as far as perennials, you have so many perennials that you deal with. So what do you do with your perennials mainly in July?
Mainly in July, and perennials, just like annuals, you want to keep everything watered. If you have any mums, you want to make sure that you keep the mums pinched back until at least July 15th. So that way you get that wonderful mum display in the fall, and it keeps it in the form that you want it in. Also, deadheading your perennials. If you have columbines or other spring perennials that have bloomed, now's a good time to go ahead and collect seed off of those so you can increase next year. But pretty much keeping them deadheaded, keeping on top of the seeds, and just keeping them watered.
And the weeds.
And the weeds.
This has been the biggest year for weeds that I can ever remember. I've never had so many weeds in my life. And as far as lawns go, remember you just have to water, and they have to have at least 1 inch a week of water, and if not, you'll have to supplement. And you hold back on the fertilizer during July and August. It's just so hard on the grass to have fertilizer when it's so hot. And you want to raise your blades so that you have a little more grass to take up that sun. And then as far as roses go, I know the Japanese beetles are here.
The Japanese beetles are coming. They're on their way.
Yeah.
That's the big thing with roses, keeping them deadheaded so maybe you can get a second bloom after the beetles have moved through is really important. Again, keeping them watered. With the Japanese beetles, they are only here until August, so we do have a short time that we do have to deal with them. I know a lot of people reach for their insecticide during this time of year, but there are some good alternatives to insecticide. You can physically remove the beetles early in the morning as they are still kind of dormant from the night. Also, you can use a product that's called diatomaceous earth, which is a powder that you can put onto your roses and spread on there. It's easy, it's earth-friendly, and you can use it on not only your roses, but your other ornamentals and vegetables.
It's very sharp. It's a very sharp product. You can't see how sharp it is, but if you look under a microscope, it's like little razors, and that cuts them up, and they don't like that. So it's great around the hostas, too, because it takes care of those slugs. And the hostas, so that's great. And the trees and shrubs, if you have planted any trees and shrubs, remember to keep them watered, and watch for any scalar bagworms. Right now, maybe the bagworms might be coming into play. So watch your trees and shrubs that you've planted. I know I planted several shrubs this past spring, and the best thing to do is take that water meter. There's a meter you can buy, and you just stick it in the ground. It tells you if it's moist or dry, and just use your meter and to check your water supply on your trees and shrubs, because you can overwater. Some of your hydrangeas will look like they need water during the day because they just kind of wilt. And actually they don't need water, it's just their reaction to the heat. And then by the evening they pop back up, or the next morning they pop back up, and they really don't need water. But at the heat of the day, sometimes they look like they need water, but they don't. So that moisture meter is really important to use when you have a question whether a plant really needs water, because you can put too much water on and then the roots will be destroyed. So just watch your water and use your water meter. I think Walmart used to carry them in Lowe's and Home Depot. Tractor Supply, I think, has them, so they're not very expensive, and it's really a great investment. And as far as vegetables, I don't grow a lot of vegetables, and I don't have any tomatoes yet this year. My tomatoes are doing terrible. And I don't know, you've got vegetable gardens both at Peel and Compton, right? Or mainly at Peel?
Mainly at Peel. We do have vegetable gardens at Peel. With vegetables, again, it's keeping them watered. Also start looking at your cucumbers and your zucchini. Make sure that you're not getting powdery mildew from watering overhead. You want to kind of keep the water close to the ground. If you can use a drip irrigation system or even a soaker hose to water them, it's better, because it'll reduce the amount of powdery mildew that you have to deal with. But pretty much you're harvesting vegetables for this time of year and enjoying kind of reaping the hard work that you put in earlier in the year.
Right. Now you have lettuce growing, right, too, at the garden?
I do have lettuce growing at the gardens. Lettuce, you want to watch for bolting, which is when it's producing flower to produce seed. So you want to keep it trimmed back and keep harvesting that lettuce.
So you can harvest the lettuce almost all summer, right?
You can, yes.
But it doesn't get bitter at the end of with the heat.
I've noticed a little bit of bitter at the end, but it also depends on what varieties that you have planted.
Different varieties. That's very good. Well, I thank you so much for all that information about vegetables, because I don't grow that many vegetables. So, but if you have any other questions about gardening in July, remember the Master Gardener hotline is available from Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 9 to 12 and 1 to 4, and you just call 271-1060. You'll get a master gardener and they can answer your questions, mail you information if you need it. And they also have a hotline. The hotline, they have a website, so they have a website and this is filled with a lot of information. So also the Bella Vista Garden Club website is available, and it's bellavistagardenclub.com. And it's just full of all kinds of gardening information, and whatever you need to know is probably on those two websites. The Garden Club will start their meetings in September. We're off for the summer, basically, and we'll start our meetings on Wednesday, September 28th. That's when we'll start having our meetings again. And Carrin, again, I want to thank you so much for all the information, and I've got to get back down to Compton real quick to see what's going on in July and see all the plants blooming, and get over to Peel too after a little visit to Walmart. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you've enjoyed the show, and you'll tune in next month.